life's truest wealth is found in the faces and stories of those we walk alongside. When we slow down to value people over achievements, we begin to live the kind of life God intended, a life of deep connection, joy, and lasting impact. Hi, friends. I'm Jem Fadling, and this is the Unhurried Living Podcast, where we inspire you to rest deeper, live fuller, and lead better. Today, I'm talking with Christian Mungai, global movement pastor at Mariners Church, native Kenyan, and part of the team behind the influential Rooted discipleship process. Christian's story stretches from his upbringing in Nairobi to his work shaping communities of faith here in the United States. Along the way, he has seen that life's truest wealth is not found in accomplishments or possessions, but in the people God has placed around us. In his new book, People Are the Wealth, Christian draws from his African heritage to share a vision of Christian living that is relational, spiritual, and transformative. He invites us to reimagine success, shifting our focus from what we can achieve to how we can invest in others. It's a message that speaks to anyone longing for a more connected, life-giving faith. Christian will inspire you to slow down, pay attention, and see the people around you as the priceless gift they truly are. Well, Pastor Christian Mungai, thank you so much for coming on the Unhurried Living Podcast. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege.
Yes. Well, I thought we would just start, before we dive into your book, of course, it's called People Are the Wealth. I thought maybe we could just hear a little bit about you. You sort of open up with your story in the book. How did you come from Kenya to Orange County?
Thank you, Jan, for having me. My story, I'll just try and be brief about it. So born and raised in Kenya, on the east side of the city of Nairobi, which is the lower income, mostly difficult areas, majorly marginalized. But then I went to school on the east side, on the west side. So born in the east, raised in the east, and then went to school in the west. And that was because my parents, or my dad and mom, had this high view of education, but they knew that for us to have an education, they would have to sacrifice and live in a place where they can afford so that we can go to the best schools. And that in itself tells us a little bit about my story, because I wasn't east enough for the east and I wasn't west enough for the west. So I went to school with some of the wealthiest kids, some of the most some of the most, prestigious people in our country. But then I would go home to what we'd call a ghetto. And but what it inadvertently led to is this life where I never belonged to either. And so I have become a bridge builder. And this is because my dad was raised as a Christian because my grandfather became a Christian. So my grandfather became a Christian because of Scottish missionaries who made their way to my grandpa's village. And so my grandpa was one of the first few Christians in his village. And he became a chef, then raised his 12 kids. And one of his kids was my dad. And my dad became a Presbyterian minister. And then I grew up in my Christian faith. Of course, I walked away from it. I had some wayward years. But then I came back to it when I was 17. And but growing up in the East and West has kind of mapped and shaped my life. That's what I get to do today. I get to be a bridge builder for people from different places and different generations, different cultures, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-generational, multi-sectoral. And so it was kind of a precursor to what I get to do today. And so it's been a great gift. When I was 17, after I graduated from high school at 18, my parents sent me to India on a one-way ticket and one-term school fees because they felt that I should become a lawyer against my will. And I never wanted to study law, but at 18 years old, I made my way to India, to a place they had never been, I had never been, and to nobody. That was a faith journey. But that's where my faith really grew, because I was so out of my comfort zone, so out of my element as a young man. But my faith grew there. But after I finished my education, I went back home and gently and kindly told my parents, thank you so much for your generosity and for your help, but I really want to go to America and study I want to go to become an actor. That's what I want. I wanted to become a soccer player or an actor. Two things that you cannot be, because my parents thought, as African parents, they thought that's a hobby. It's not a career.
Right.
Anyway, made my way to America. I came here, and quickly I realized that my law degree was almost, null and void, because the law systems are very different. And so I struggled for a couple of years, and then ultimately, I heard about a Kenyan prayer breakfast that was happening. I show up there, and long story short, three of my childhood buddies happened to be there, unbeknownst to us. The three of them happened to be musicians, so they started leading worship for the little fellowship. They told me to join in, and since they told me you want to be an actor, you might as well act as a singer. That's what I did. I acted as a singer for a while, and we formed a band. It took off. We had some notoriety. And then ultimately, I told them I'd love to incorporate our band as a nonprofit. And so we did. And the nonprofit became real. And we started traveling the country. So we'd do 40 state tours across the US. And then in 2004, we made our way to Mariners Church, challenged them on how they're engaging their faith. And at first it was difficult, but ultimately they listened. And then they finally said, would you come on our staff? So I've been on staff at Mariners Church for the last 18 years. And it's been a joy. But that's a little bit about my journey of getting to where I am today.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that is just a blast through. I'm sure there's so many more amazing stories in there that we did not hear.
I know.
Oh, my goodness. Well, what a story to have all those opportunities. But I like to go back to what you're saying about yourself at the very beginning, which is that you're a bridge builder.
Absolutely.
That sort of came into your spirit very young, just because of the kind of the two worlds you were in. And what a gift of God to prepare you even for what you do. Amazing.
Yeah, and I had no idea. I think it was Kierkegaard who said, life must be lived forward, but it's only understood backwards. And I think that's what I get to see, is that I had no idea. At that time, it was just East and West. I had no idea. But God uses it all, if you allow it. Even some places of your pain can be your platform. And I think that's what kind of happened. And now I look back in retrospect, that God was kind of just setting me up for that. So when people say, how do you know you were going to do this? I had no idea. I had never wanted to be a pastor. I wanted to be a soccer player and an actor. And I'm neither of them, and or either a lawyer too, because I never pursued my law after my degree, So God has just a way of just working things out. Just when you look back, and that's why life happens gradually and then suddenly. So just one right step in front of the other, and then suddenly here I am doing what I get to do. What a gift! What a gift!
So good. Yeah, my husband Alan just interviewed the author of that book. Was that Batterson? Gradually and then suddenly.
Yeah.
Yeah. He just interviewed him. I don't know if it's aired yet, but anyway, what a great title of a book. And it is so true. Isn't that the way it works? It's little steps all at a time. And then all of a sudden something happens. And it was because of all these things that led up to it. Such good truth.
It is. It is such a great truth. I love it. We've actually been using that for years. The gradually and then suddenly was been something even before Batterson's book. We were talking about that, and we used to use it in relationship to going to the gym. So you go to the gym, you never wake up one day and you're buff. It's the little steps, and it's either way. It's positively and negatively. You don't wake up one day and all click. You do it slowly, and then one day you're there. And then the reverse is true. Go to the gym one day at a time, and all of a sudden you build muscle. And I think most of us, I say that we are in a spiritual gym. Every day you're just taking the right next step with God. And one day you wake up and you realize, oh, I've matured. You never know that you've matured, but you look back and you say, wow, how much I've matured in my faith. And so being a bridge builder has been something that has been gradually and then suddenly.
Yeah. Well, you're using a lot of vocabulary that we use here at Unhurried Living. We talk a lot about those small and simple steps that you take over time, because we are being formed, and you get to decide which way, like you said, which way do you want to be formed?
Absolutely.
Right? So I really love that, gradually and then suddenly. I'm wondering now, maybe let's pivot and talk a little bit about your book. I'm really intrigued, especially the people focus. I mean, it's called People Are the Wealth. So you've made it very clear up front that we're talking about relationships and actual human beings. So what do you think is the importance of your book at this time? Maybe tell us maybe the main theme of it and why it's important now.
Yeah. So the title of the book, People of the Wealth, comes from an African proverb that my dad would share with me. My dad was one of my heroes. He passed on 2018. But then he inculcated this view in me from when we were young. So while we're living in a place that you would call, deep poverty, I never thought of myself as poor because my dad would say, money will make you rich, but it'll never make you wealthy because you're only as wealthy as the people you have around you because people are the wealth. And so by that definition, my dad would say we're pretty wealthy because we had people all around us. And even when it came time to send me to school for my education, we didn't have the money, but my dad said, hey, we've got friends. And so one afternoon after church, they rallied a bunch of friends around a church, and we raised money for one term's fees and one-way ticket to India. And they said, God has provided enough for now. You got to go. So I'm not self-made. I'm a result of people who have invested. And quite honestly, no one is. It's the people who've invested in them. So that title, People of the Wealth, became such that proverb, it formed my life. I use it all the time. I try to live as such. But as I've been working in the mission space, it became very clear to me that there's some things that we may need to rethink, reimagine. And so rethinking, especially the starting point for missions, became something that I became challenged by. So the main thrust of the book is this. Anytime you talk about global missions or you talk about missions, people have two focuses. It's either the Great Commission, Matthew 28, which is predominantly the one that people call the missions, or some will say the Great Commandment, Matthew 25, go and do good. When you did lost the list of this, you did it not to me. And so you've got these two aspects of missions. And so you've got Great Commission, and then you've got Great Commandment. But as I thought about and as I've been engaging in the mission space for the last 18 years, I found out that maybe we're missing something. And what we're missing is maybe the starting point. And so for me, as I looked at the scriptures, I thought, man, why do we have to wait until Matthew? Why don't we start at Genesis? And what I have come to recognize is that even before creation existed, community was. So before God creates the world or the earth, he existed in community, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So there was unity and diversity in the Trinity. And so there was community there. And so when God creates a world, he creates us in the image of a community, and so, but we don't recognize that. We think of ourselves as individuals, but we're created in the image of a God who is a we. And so we cannot be our fullest self until we're a we and not a me. But we just live a life of me. And so what if we started our missions mandate by going back to the intentionality of inherent worth and dignity of every human being, but that inherent worth and dignity is a communal image. And so if we became more of a we, then maybe we could restore everything to its original intent, because the actual essence of missions is to go back to shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken, great relationship with God, with self, with each other, with the environment. But that was broken by Genesis 3. And so what I do in the book is to kind of talk about on the cover, we have the three-legged stool. And I said, okay, so if you have two aspects, there's a third spoke, which I think we've been missing. And in my culture, a three-legged stool symbolized stability, it symbolized family, it symbolized unity with the ancestors. And so I said, maybe we should have a more robust thinking about it. And so, and it would change the way we engage. And so people become the subjects and not the objects of our mission. And so that's the essence of the book, is kind of trying to rethink the starting point of global missions with two very important aspects. One, the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, that every human being you come across is created in the image of God. And therefore, you're meeting, as you meet anybody, it doesn't matter who you're meeting, they have an inherent worth and dignity. And maybe our work is to find why God created them in the first place. And so they become the subjects that we get to bring together. But then we bring them together in community. And so that's the second aspect is inherent worth and dignity, but then a community. And in fact, most of the Bible, most Westerners will not understand this, but most of the Bible is written to a we culture, not to an I culture or me culture. And so even from the beginning, the Ten Commandments were not given to a person, they were given to a people in such a way that if people saw how those people are living, they would go like, that is so cool, we want to be a part of that community. Just like the same thing when Israel was chosen, they were blessed to be a blessing, but at times when we feel that blessing, we make it us, we make it mine, And so that's why the book exists. And that's why I thought it's just spreading the doctrine of the image of God, a high view of the doctrine of the image of God, but spoken from an African perspective, because for us, it makes sense as a culture that is more communal in essence. So that's why the book, that's the main premise of the book.
I really love that because, I've been born and raised here in the United States. And so I live and breathe that culture of I and me.
Yeah.
And, and I've been to Africa once. I visited Rwanda and Uganda, and we had the privilege of working with leaders there. And so we met with just some stellar, amazing people. But when I could feel, I've said this before about visiting other countries, when I go somewhere else, I can always feel my own culture on me when I'm in another culture. And it's like I could feel the sort of the rushing and the assumptions that I make because you're bumping into a whole different kind of way of living.
Yes,
and you can't be in Africa very long without picking up on how community oriented they are and people centered they are, and they have a completely different sense of time.
Absolutely.
And how long they want to talk or visit, or in America, there's always this sense of I'm going somewhere else. You don't get that sense there. They're not trying to do something else, and I just think that's beautiful. And I love that you're bringing that sensibility to us because it's easy for us to be of our own culture because we live in it.
Yeah. The sense of time is actually very it's a very unhurried living. It's very unhurried living because the most important thing is presence. So you're not thinking about where you've come from or where you're going. You're thinking about the gift that it is to be present at that particular moment. And so when you show up at some place, people are not worried about that you are late. They're grateful that you are there. So you just enjoy your presence. So nobody is, it took me a while to understand that in America, being late is actually rude, because, in a lot of the, the 2/3 world, you cannot predict everything because nothing is scheduled according to time. And so you just are grateful. An event starts when it starts and it ends when it ends. You're not looking at the clock. What we have is time. We have a very unhurried living. And so people are just present, And so when I saw your title of your podcast, I was like, this is actually really cool. It sounds very African, unhurried living.
Yes.
And that's how we walk just gently and slowly. Nobody's moving fast,
Well, we're in our own way. Again, as I said, my husband and I are both born and raised here, but we are in our own way because we believe that there is a pattern of Jesus that is unhurried. What you just described is the way of Jesus. He stopped for people when it wasn't convenient to the disciples. And he walked the way of love, which is absolutely unhurried because you have to have presence and willingness to be with whatever's going on. So we're just trying to, hopefully in our own way, help maybe perpetuate the same sort of mindset or way of life that you're talking about. And sometimes I'm jealous of the Africans I've met that you have that sort of inherently in you. And I feel like I have to sort of fight against the cultural thing that's sort of on me from living here so long. But it can be practiced.
It can. And we have great examples. So for example, in the book, I talk about this is the essence of our ministry is Jesus' mission to us. That's what forms what we are. And you think about how he came to earth, in Philippians 2. It was the most unhurried living you ever seen. So think about it. God has this idea, let's go save the world. and he says, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to send a baby. The best way to save the world is to send a baby. It's a most asinine, most non-Western way of thinking, because what's the return on investment on a baby? What's the KPIs on a baby? Like literally, you come in weak, needy, and for 30 years, really, Jesus did nothing. So can you imagine Jesus' missions report for 30 years? I was just hanging around Nazareth. It is not, it would never make our missions, reports and our missions ROIs and KPIs. Never. For 30 years, Jesus just was. He just acculturated. He became like us so that we can become with him. And so when you think about that's the premise of our missions, why do we then do it so backwards when he says, as as I've sent the Son, so send I you? Is that the way we're being sent? Are we being sent? We're sent in a quick, people have to go fast, quick. They don't care to take time to actually understand the people that they're going to be with. And that's why I love the missionaries who reached my grandfather, because they actually had the foresight of taking time to understand why my grandfather was involved in a ritual of looking and facing a mountain and worshiping a mountain. They took the time to understand that. They never came and just immediately judged them and said, you guys are worshiping a mountain, idol worshippers. It was it's just a slowed way of doing it. And then he did the ministry in 3 years and he was gone, And so I think there's something there that we can learn just by looking at the essence of our faith, or how even our faith came to be, So that premise is really important for us. And I think it's something that we miss out as we engage in the missions world.
I really love what you're saying, Christian, because it sounds like you're getting us back to sort of the center of things, under the surface of things, where the way matters, not just the what. And, in your book, right? The way matters. And you said when you're talking about the shifting this missions, you said sending and fixing, that you wanted to shift from sending and fixing, which is kind of an American way, to listening and learning, which is what you just described. Maybe talk a little bit more about that, because I know that, again, I keep talking about America, but we are living here in America, in the United States, and we have tendencies, and we do tend to think that we know how to make things happen and how things are done well or right or whatever. And then we can take that somewhere and act like an expert. But you're talking about listening and learning, right? So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think I'd first acknowledge that the Western way of doing things is really a gift. It truly is. There's efficiencies, the maximization of times. People want accountability. It's actually a really good way. It's a gift. But many times our gifts can also be our challenges when taken and loaded on other people, as this is the way to do things. So I think that's a beautiful gift. So I don't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater. I want to say that that's what has led to what we get to see in terms of great civilizations, great culture, great wealth, financial wealth. So it's a gift. But I think to come and then now just put that and load it over on other people is where the challenge becomes. So I think the gifting becomes, when you take your gift, take it with you to wherever you are, but take time to understand the culture that you're stepping into. Because while that's a gift that one culture has been given, that one gift is not the predominant gift. And just because you have more money, you have more education, doesn't mean that that's wisdom. Because information, it does not become just, I've met some of the wisest people that have no education, but we equate wisdom to education. Just because somebody has knowledge doesn't mean that they've been able to synthesize that into how they live. It's just a bunch of information. And so I think, and I think that's why I challenge in the book. I say, let's move from an event into a narrative. An event checks, you check a box. You come in, you do an event, and you check a box. But let's stop, doing events, and let's create story. And our stories are the currency of human contact. I think that's somebody McKee said that. Robert McKee said that. So take time to understand people's story, get to know them, get to understand where you're from. In Kenya, when you meet somebody for the first time, you don't ask them what they do. You ask them, where are you from, your village, and who are your people, your family. Because if you tell me where you're from and you tell me who your family is, I'll tell you who you are. You know, so in America, you want to meet somebody, you ask them what they do, and immediately you size them. You know, you put them in the rightful place. But that's the way you move from an event to a narrative. Another thing that you do is you move from just something that is pragmatic to communion or community, where you're not just coming in to just get what you want, but you're coming to build community. And then the other thing that I challenge is moving from just good deeds. You know, it's I want to do a project and get done, or am I really there to do development? You know, because projects come and go, but development is actually much tougher. And then is it self interest or are you doing servanthood? And self interest is about me. I did this, I went there, I accomplished this. Or are you coming in as a servant? Because the problem of coming in as servanthood, we talk about servant leadership and servanthood, but let me tell you, once you become a servant, at times people will treat you as such. And that will tell you whether you're really a servant. Because if somebody treats you as a servant, when you've come down at servanthood, then all of a sudden you realize it's about you. You realize it's about your self-interest. And so those are some of the things that you just, if you understand that, it'll take time to really go in with a posture of learning. And that's why I think 1 Corinthians chapter 12, which one of my bishops paraphrased, has been a guiding scripture for me. You know, the hand cannot say to the foot, I do not need you. The toe cannot say to the head, I do not need you. The whole body, we're one body. And I think if we go to the other parts of the body with respect, honor, dignity, caring to find out why do you exist and why do you do the things that you are, I think that will give us a better place than just saying, hey, this is how we do it. This is how it's going to happen. And, you know, it becomes, just because it works in the West doesn't mean you export it to the rest.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, the undercurrent of what you're sharing, I think I'm hearing that it would be good to have a little humility.
Absolutely. Completely.
Right. Just some humility. You're going to be with other people who have a way of life, and you don't have to just lay something on them. And
Absolutely.
I love these words. You said wisdom, narrative, servanthood. These are all unhurried terms as well. That stuff doesn't happen quickly.
No, it doesn't.
So you're taking a very formational stance toward missions.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm contending that mission is not about just accomplish something. It's about being fully formed. And as we're being fully formed, we're slowly going back to the original intent of what God had, which is perfect relationship, shalom, shalom. And so that means that poverty cannot be just described as, abject poverty. There's a ton of poverty that I see in America. It's just hidden behind gated communities.
Right. Well, Mother Teresa famously called that the poverty of the West, right? The poverty of spirit.
Absolutely.
Poverty of heart.
Yeah. There's a poverty. Sure. So ultimately, and I think Mother Teresa is the one who said that we, the Western people and the African people, we're just one beggar going to another trying to find out where we can find bread. So we're both beggars in essence. But I think as we engage each other mutually and reciprocally, what we find is that we actually go back to the original intent, where there's nothing missing, nothing broken. I think when I was in India, one guru told me, some people are so poor, so poor that all they have is money.
Oh man! Oh man!
I was like, what are you talking about? It's like, yeah, some people, all they have is money. They have nothing else. They have nothing else. And so I think just that formational aspect takes us back. If we were to think about it from a formation standpoint, and that's why even where I've been working at Minus Church, I say that, one of the aspects of missions is not doing, it's about being. It's being fully formed as a Christian, and your formation is intricately bound with the other person's formation. And so, we need that, intricacy of that global formation from each other, every nation, every tribe, every tongue, and so that we can come to the full stature of who Christ called us to be. I think that's what people don't think about, a lot when they get into missions. It's always about accomplishing something. It's about coming to get people to believe in Jesus. And yes, that is it, But remember that every person you're coming across has really got an image. The icon of God is already in them. If you are unhurried and you engage time, you'd actually find out, why did God really create this person? And that might be a really good doorway to restoring everything back to shalom. So so the formation
Yeah, there was a book. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just
I missed
said
the last sentence. I'm sorry.
Formation is the essence.
Yeah, I was just remembering that book from, I don't know, the 80s, maybe it's called Eternity in Their Hearts. I think that's in scripture. Eternity in Their Hearts. And I just remember, yeah, so good. And I love this formational conversation. Of course, I'm a spiritual director. And so the paradigm that you're describing is the paradigm that I try to move through life with, because I think the training in that really helped, that God is at work. This is assumptions spiritual directors make. God is already at work. God is within this person, around this person, and you can honor and respect them exactly as they are, where they are. And then you listen deeply.
Yeah.
Right. And you're asking questions. I just think that's a beautiful way to just be a human. not just a spiritual director. Yeah.
It is. And that's what, like, the essence of People Are the Wealth is that there's inherent worth and dignity. And our work, I always say that in my work of bridge building, my mission statement is actually to excavate the image bearer in every human being for the sake of bridge building. So I don't bring anything. It's like Michelangelo said, in a block of stone, all I just do is chip away until the image actually emerges. So we're not bringing things to people. Our work is to go and find out, and you excavate. And so but to excavate takes time. It has to, you're seeing, you're looking, you're hearing, you're listening. It's not rushed. It's time. And that's what we don't have, especially in the West. But I say that in Africa, we actually have the time. You guys have the clock.
Right. Well, that's the conversation, right? Because we actually do have the time. We just act like we don't, and we make up stories. Like you said, we craft narratives that make it seem like we don't, but there's choices you could make. Absolutely. And there's perspectives that you could have to shift your very view of time. I love talking about that. But one of the things, another phrase you said in the book, I think this was early on, just going back to what we were talking about, where people go on mission and they think they're supposed to do something, and they would ask you, what are we going to do? That's just a very common thing to do. But I love what you said. You said, what we're going to do is be human with our brothers and sisters in this new place.
Completely.
I saw that and I thought, what a beautiful, how fortunate Mariners is to have a pastor with such a heart and with such wisdom. What we're going to do is be with other people. But that's beautiful. I really, really love that.
It's the hardest thing, because when everybody challenges that, because they just want to go and do something.
Of course.
And what you forget is, it's not a new premise. It's actually the gospel. In the gospel, it's the only place that our doing comes from our becoming. It's the imperative indicative. You don't do to become. You become and then you do. And so anytime you are and you become human with somebody else, the doing will come out of it. But unfortunately, we've kind of flipped that, and the doing precedes the being. And so what we've been working on for years, and it's still such a grind, is that what are we going to do? Everybody wants to go and do something, and it's because there's a sense of a lack of significance, and when you have nothing more significant than yourself to live for, you actually lose your significance, and so it's about you, not about the other people who you're going to engage. And so I think what we don't realize is that let's be first. Let's just be present. The doing will come out of it. It will inadvertently appear. It'll appear because it will come out. But what you're going to do is you're going to study subjects. It's our people. They have inherent worth. They have inherent dignity. Get to know them. What comes out of that will just be an excuse. And it'll actually, even what you get to do will be doing something that will increase their being. mutually and reciprocally. So it's not an easy thing, but missions as formation is such an aspect of that we've completely missed, and that's why I'm calling that third spoke. Or if the two are the wings of a plane, then the body of the plane is the doctrine of the image of God, which we've missed. You know, we are very busy flying this plane, some with one wing, others with the other wing, and then whatever wing it is, and then but we've left out the whole body. So we're just like wings flying around without a body.
Yeah.
You
For
know,
sure. Yeah, we often talk here about John 15, which of course is the vine and the branches. I think that's a similar idea, is just remaining on the vine,
remain,
right? The
just
wings,
be.
I mean, without the plane, I mean, you have to have the whole plane to make the plane fly, right?
Yeah.
And you can't have grapes unless the branch is on the vine. It's not going to happen.
Completely.
Simple image.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you would return to me to the idea of servant leadership. We talk to Christian leaders here. And so, can you just talk about servant leadership? Maybe your perspective on how it helps the sustainability and the effectiveness of a leader, to pivot to that idea of being a servant leader, as you would define. I'd love to hear what you think about that, and how does it bring? How does that lead to maybe I don't know, more rich community even?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier on. I said we talk about servant leadership as a good concept, and everyone wants to become a servant leader. But wait until somebody treats you as a servant and see how you react. Because that will tell you how it is. Because as a servant leader, you're gonna get into some painful areas. Because you don't just get to do what you do because you're the leader or because you're in charge. As a servant leader, you take time to listen, to understand. You seek first to understand and to be understood. And so I think, and the essence of a servant leader is what Jesus modeled for us. Weakness, vulnerability, time, acculturation. People say assimilation. I don't like the word assimilation, because assimilation, you lose yourself. We're not being called into a melting pot. You're being called into a flower garden, and that's acculturation. You come in and you are a part. You understand the culture. You still maintain your essence and who you are, but then it joins in a beautiful flower garden. It's not a melting pot. So as a servant leader, you're taking time, and I think Jesus provides the best way of being a servant leader. And even when he begins his ministry, he's not going to be looking for the best of the best. He's actually works with young guys who are just a ragtag bunch of volunteers, and these 12 dudes that he brought together from every background, tax collectors, zealots, all kinds, this ragamuffin kind of group. And he pulls them together, walks with them for 3 years, and then leaves them the mandate to take the gospel to the world. And today, Jem, you and I are here because of that group of people. They had a servant leader, but his ways of leading were not a program, it was a person. It was life on life. It was, willing to walk with them. Hey, come on, let's get on the boat. Let's go on the other side. And then in that, yes, there's a storm. They're walking around a wheat field. They says, how come the wheat and the tares are growing together? It's such a beautiful life on life leadership. And I don't think we have time for that. Our organizations have made us lose the organism, and the organism is the person, So we're being led by organizations, we're being led by machinery and mechanisms, and we've lost the essence of what the organization began there in the first place, which is the people themselves. So when I think about servant leadership from my perspective, it's a very different thing. It's gonna cost you. It really is gonna cost you, but it's a good thing. People talk about it because it's a good thing. I think Greenleaf is the one who kind of helped catapult that word. And everybody says, I'm a servant leader. Let's create servant leaders. But if you're really a servant leaders, what happens when you're treated as one? That is what will show you. Will not know what's inside until you're squeezed. And servant
Right.
leadership is not an easy thing. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the one who created everything, the intricacies, the complexities we see, was not too proud to lay that all down and come in the form of humanity. And you know what happened to him? He was mistreated. He grew up in obscurity. He was raised up in poverty. Are we willing to be that kind of a servant leader? Or do you want a servant leader who is still in large and in charge? That's a different concept. Even I'm still grappling with it myself.
For sure. For sure. Well, I'm wondering, can you even get a little more personal for us to hear? Because you you serve in a very large Southern California church in a very wealthy area with, there's venues. How do
Yeah.
you keep this servant leader? What does that look like? Do you slow down time? Are you with people in these ways? I would imagine it would be difficult in the machine you just described.
Oh yeah, it is. It's tough. But then that's when and that's why even the book itself came out of it's not a book, it's what our global strategy has been for our church. So basically, when we wrote our global strategy, we wrote it in that way. So the essence of that book is it's the four main aspects of it is theology, and then we're talking about philosophy, and then we're talking about ethos, which is postures that we have to change. And so there's 5 postures that I recommend that we change, and then ultimately it affects how our practice. So the essence, the book itself, is our global strategy. So in fact, the way the book came about was when I was working on something else. Somebody says, "Where is this thinking from?" And I said, "Well, we have a way of thinking that I kind of helped develop." And then he says, "Can I see it?" And I showed them my 5 slides and says, "When are you writing that book?" I said, "What book?" He said, that your strategy is actually a book." I said, I'm not an author. I don't write books. I just like to be with people." And he said, "This is actually a book, and I think you should put it together." And that's how it came to be. So the entire book is literally the essence of what we're talking about. Is we have to rethink theology as a starting point. We have to look at global trends and think about what are some global trends that have happened around the world. What are some global leaders that are, we need to listen to? Are we listening to just the leaders that have a microphone, which most of the time happens to be the West? They've got the platform, they have the money, and then postures is like what are postures we need to think, and then how does that change how we practice things? So that is the essence of that. But I'll tell you that when you get into this idea of servant leadership and bringing it together, it not only changes the people that I lead, it also changes me. So, for example, I remember the first time I came to Mariners Church. I challenged them and I said, "Hey, what you guys are doing is not right." And the way it's, and that's not anybody in America wants to hear that. And I just came in guns ablaze. And I think, of course, in every place that we went to, people wouldn't give as much attention because we're young boys. I was only 25 or 24, 26, I think. And we're telling people who are experiencing missions that what you're doing is not going to help us. It's actually hurting us. Eventually, a book was written about that, when helping hurts. But we used to talk about that a long time before that. But I was confronted with my own um, pride. Because one of the ways I used to come is just blast people and tell them, "Hey, what you're doing is wrong." And then in my first meeting with somebody at Miners, I was so convicted that I went back home and I thought to myself, I've actually become what Americans are to us. They show up, they tell us what we're doing is wrong, and what we need is what we have, instead of taking the time to actually listen and learn who these people are. And as I got to know the people, I actually started appreciating, and I learned that there was much for me to learn there. So Mariners became a place where I was being mutually formed. So it wasn't just me forming them. I have been formed in ways that I can never describe, whether it's, morally, emotionally, mentally. I have been, I talk about the 3 things that every human being needs is to be known, to belong, and to be valued. And that's what has happened at Minus for me. And it is happening mutually. So to be fully known and fully loved, because most people think, if you fully know me, would you really love me? And I felt that that's what happened, is that I got to be known and I got to be loved. And to be fully known means that your vulnerability will come out and the weaknesses and your failures. And these are some of the things I even talk about. But then the longing to belong is a longing for love. How you know you love someone is when you make them belong, because how do you express love? By belonging. And so there's that longing. And then the third longing is the longing to be valued. And that's saying that you have something to bring to the table. And that's why even being brought to the table, not many people will bring an African guy and say, hey, come and sit at the table and help us shape our missions. No, nobody would ever do that. But mariners did that for me too. So as you can tell, it's mutual. That whole idea is mutual. I'm being changed, I'm being formed, I'm belonging, and I get to do that with the people. So you're present with people, you're walking with them. It's a daily thing. It's an excavation. It's a time. It's unhurried. And then what end up happening is that once you do that, then what it leads to is to deeper formation that leads to sustainable essence at the back end. Because now people not become about, it's not about me doing a project, not self-interest. This becomes about development. And development means that you have to then take time to understand what are the real issues, because that's one of the things I used to tell people is that you have diagnosed the way you've diagnosed our problems is actually wrong. And because of diagnosing it wrong, you've been addressing symptoms and not systemic issues. But when you take time and you understand the culture, you realize, oh, Africa is really actually the richest continent in terms of natural resources. Then why is it dealing with abject poverty? Then that question leads to, okay, then maybe what we don't need is not more wells or more schools and more this. There's something else that we need to. And I think the essence is helping the Africans see themselves as the solution makers of their own continent. Africa will not be changed from the outside in, it will be changed from the inside out. But we have abdicated that because you've got all these people coming to tell you, let's show you how to do this. Instead of saying, no, let's bring these Africans and let them be the ones to lead us. And our work of coming beside them is only catalytic. It's not starting anything new. And so that's what even at Mariners we do. We don't start anything globally. We catalyze and collaborate with the global church to advance the Great Commission. Our work is catalytic. You come in, you speed up a reaction, but then a catalyst not only speeds up a reaction, it also leaves no residue of itself. And so that's the essence of it. And so it then leads to these sustainable aspects because then you realize, oh, we don't need more child sponsorship. I think go back to traditional African community, there was nothing like an orphan because you are immediately taken in by your family. We don't create institutions for kids. Kids will actually belongs to a family because it's a communal family thing. So it changes how we then respond even to development and how to help things change. So, but it's very slow and it's not attractive to most Westerners.
Right.
Yeah.
I can totally see that. Oh, I just love everything you're saying, Christian. It's very God-centered, Christ-centered. You're looking at being organic. Again, bringing up the term narrative. You're looking for wisdom, servanthood, being a catalyst. Again, all of these things are very real, very organic, time-consuming, but also, as you said, not quick. So I just love everything you're saying. I'm so glad we're having this conversation because it fits in very well with what we talk about in our own way here at Unhurried Living.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would want to say? Again, remembering that the people who are listening to us are they're hardworking Christian leaders, trying to do their best to serve God in all the various ways that they do. What would you say to them now, even as a pastoral blessing or some form of encouragement?
Yeah, I think what I'd say is something that I borrowed from a 13-year-old daughter. We were recently in India, and she got a chance to speak to these pastors who've gone through such atrocious stuff. I mean, it's incredible. But she got up, a 13-year-old girl, and she says, I don't look like my dad. I don't look like my mom. So my wife is a blue-eyed blonde from South Dakota. And, I'm an African guy from Kenya. Been married for 15 years. We have this beautiful 13-year-old kid. There is such a joy. And then she said, I don't look like my dad. I don't look like my mom. So and then she says, who am I? And then she said, she quoted, I think, Psalm 139. And she says, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And then she said, if you do not know who you are, then how are you going to tell people about God? And I just thought to myself, maybe I should just pray and close out that meeting, because it was so profound in myself. This girl just saying that. I just think for every leader is understanding who you are, because as you understand who you are and you get to understand your essence and the things that make you, and then you would then serve out of a full heart, not out of an empty heart. Because I think we are going out there, and that's why we get so hurried and so rushed and so given to ROIs and KPIs, is because we're trying to fill a void in us. And I think understanding who we are in Him is such a beautiful thing, knowing that He created us in His image, He created us with inherent worth and dignity. There's nothing you need to do. God doesn't need you to do anything. He doesn't use you because He needs you. He uses you because He loves you. And so what if we served and did everything from a full heart other than an empty heart? How would that change things? We're not trying to prove anything. His finished work has given us what we get to do. And so we go out serving because of what He's done for us. And so it actually changes the way we do it. We're maybe slower to understand. We're not trying to feel anything. So I think I'll use that from my daughter, is that unless you know who you are, how do you tell people of who He is? And so I think understanding that is such a beautiful thing, and going to serve out of a full heart, not out of an empty heart.
So good. Thank you. Thank you so much, Christian. Love our conversation. Go out and get his book, People Are the Wealth, and make your way through all those, the flow of the paradigm, and maybe be encouraged and changed. So thank you again so much.
Thank you, Jam. Thank you for having me. And thank you for having such a beautiful podcast with a great title, with a great name.
I'm glad you like it.
I resonate with it wholeheartedly.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again. Thank you for joining me on the Unhurried Living Podcast. You can download free resources and learn more about us at unhurriedliving.com. And please subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. We'd also like to thank our partner, Life Audio. Check out their other faith-centered podcasts at lifeaudio.com. Blessings to you as you make your way.